Welcome to the lecture on ethics and responsibility in post-conflict contexts. Ethics is the process of determining what one considers right and wrong actions. This may sound easy, but in reality it's a complicated task. Right and wrong are dictated by one's perspective and may vary according to culture, moral climate, and individual circumstance. What may be the right principle or action for one party may be absolutely wrong for another. But we need some guidelines that can help promote the integration of principles into the decision. Ethical issues are typically associated with confidentiality and conflict of interest. A third party should be neutral and unbiased. A third party may not engage in the case that he has personally or business relations with one of the parties. A third party may not engage in a dispute, program, or initiative if its result would provide him with direct or indirect advantage. Decision makers should base their analysis of some situation by taking into consideration local understanding of the context and history. There should be more reflection on what can go wrong or right due to personal assumptions. Third parties are too often poorly informed of the views and experiences of local people, and it is important to listen to the local. We have to be careful and reflective of our own cultural assumptions. The first sin is the sin of what ancient Greeks called hubris. Our morality may not be the morality of the people we are trying to help. Are we giving the people the good life or imposing a form of cultural imperialism on them? In 2001, the International Commission on Intervention and State Sovereignty writes a report on R2P. UN Secretary General Kofi Annan created an international commission to recommend ways that humanitarian intervention could be reconciled with Article 2.7 of the UN Charter, which upholds member states' domestic jurisdiction, sovereignty. But what can communities and individuals do, especially in situations where states are not functioning, in situations of crisis? Let's take choices of some individuals in Central African Republic as an example of responsible action. The conflict in the Central African Republic is often described as a conflict between Muslims and Christians. This country is a scene of ethnic and religious cleansing on a massive scale that has displaced about 20% of the population, 15% of Muslim, 50% of Christian, and 35% of animist belief. The nation of Central African Republic has been engulfed in conflict both before and after the Muslim rebel group Seleka overthrew the government in March 2013. The Seleka particularly targeted Christians in villages across the country leading up to the coup. They spread terror and violence in their wake. In response to this violence, Christian militias, anti-Balaka, emerged, and these new militias began to hunt down Muslim populations in retribution for the Seleka's actions. Hundreds of Muslims have been murdered, hundreds of thousands forced to flee the country by militia. In the midst of this conflict, two religious leaders are working together to end the bloodshed. The Imam, Umar Kubine Layama, on the right, sought refuge at the residence of the Archbishop Diodon Nezaplanga, on the left, who is the head of the Catholic Church in Kar, after receiving death threats from the anti-Muslim militia known as the anti-Balaka. Striking thing that they said is that the conflict is not about the religion, and the proof is their friendship. Before the conflict, cross-group friendships and intermarriages were common. The point is that religion, ethnicity, gender, race, all these identity markers can be used to incite conflict or to incite cooperation. They can be used for both good and bad, but it is the people who have the capacity to choose. The archbishop and the imam became constant companions, traveling to the western capitals together to draw attention to a conflict they believe has been largely ignored by the outside world. The press have coined the phrase, the inseparables, the twins. Father Xavier Fagba is another notable example of a communal and religious leader who lives and practices love and forgiveness in the face of trials. As the leader of Catholic congregation in the town of Boali in Kar, Father Fagba has had plenty of opportunities to decide whether to encourage peace or revenge. As the anti-Balaka group started atrocities and ethnic cleansing of Boali's Muslim population, Father Fagba went house to house drawing out Muslims to seek shelter in the relative safety of his church. His efforts have protected 650 Muslims from the village. Drug cartel called the Knights Templars ran the state in Mexico like its own private fiefdom. It forced farmers, agricultural laborers, and businesses at gunpoint to pay protection money and taxed agricultural products. It also began expropriating farmland used to grow avocados and lemons, either stealing farmers' land or buying the land at low prices. Those who refused to leave or sell were killed along with their families. So the communities decided to create self-defense groups to confront these Mexico's drug cartels. What have we learned from these cases? Are these acts in vain? Are they a drop of water in the ocean? No. Acts of choosing peace in the midst of conflict provide an opening for a new set of relationship with the enemy, with the other. The question is, how can we support them? Choosing peace in the midst of conflict can be dangerous. The stories of the Archbishop and Imam in Kar, as well as the story about Father Fagba or Mexican defense groups, reveal that they were threatened, shunned by their own community and by their own in-group. In conflict, it is usually us who are correct, good, and victimized, while the others are wrong, bad, and aggressive. The others who are placed outside the moral and political order, and therefore violence against them is justified as a necessity for in-group survival. Such systems are almost incapable of self-correction unless people develop intentional responses that can destabilize them. A true sustainable peace comes about when someone in the system is able to imagine a way to create discontinuity in the vicious cycles of revenge and violence and act upon it. This is a choice that an individual, a group, or a state makes by adapting to the new situation and learning from the past experiences and mistakes. Responsibility cannot only be seen as external to human beings residing in laws, judicial and international policies, mechanisms, traditions, religion, and rules, but rather internal. It is revealed to us through our individual responses to the other in particular situations. We need to recognize that we do have responsibility to choose an option that will work best for both self and the other, that will work best for all. By recognizing the stories that we covered, we are recognizing the existence of better options by making them visible and accessible to all. It is like saying that peace is possible and needed in the worst situations, and people have done it before. It should not be forgotten that it is often the other, the enemy, that we must continue living with, sharing both space and time. It is the case in Rwanda, Bosnia, Croatia, South Africa, and other places. We need to recognize that we do have the responsibility to choose an option that would work best for both self and the other. It needs to be done on international, state, communal, and individual levels. We cannot know the other unless we are curious, open, and ready to learn. The other cannot be reduced to objective knowledge and to our horizons of knowing. The other is a mystery that is revealed through the relationship that suggests inquiry, self-correction, and adaptability. Learning about the other, therefore, does not imply a reduction of our differences by seeking commonalities, but their acceptance. By expanding ourselves through others, we are creating a relational space where everyone can experience peace. It implies open and liberating relationships. The proposed concept of relational responsibility is inclusionary even of one's enemies. Relational responsibility demands forgiveness as a way to break the ties that bind us to the other's violence, to our neighbor's aggression, enmity, and envy. It illuminates the fact that current conflicts cannot be addressed through violent means, but through sustainable and legitimate mechanisms that promote dialogue, learning, and inquiry with the other at interpersonal, national, and global levels. Thanks for listening.